Potential DJI ban effect on development of FPV drone parts in the U.S. What's needed to compete? Well, Scott, what's needed to compete is a ban on importing parts because, as far as I can tell, we're not going to compete with China on labor costs, right? America isn't going to compete with China on labor costs. They're not going to compete with China on environmental protection, on worker protection, on any of the ways that other countries cut corners in order to lower costs. And then American companies go to those countries so that they can increase profits. And, it's the beautiful, beautiful way that the world works. So in order to compete, we're going to need to be able to charge more money and we're going to need tariffs or some other kind of protection. And I want to be really clear that I'm not espousing those things. I'm not saying that I would prefer that those things happen. I'm just saying that if your end goal is a viable U.S. manufacturing market for drone parts, then there's no way that American companies are going to be able to compete with China on price. And the American consumer is very concerned about price. So what are you going to do? Well, you're either going to see companies that are selling American-made stuff, targeting customers who have other reasons for avoiding China and don't care about price. In other words, the government, right? The government wants to avoid stuff from China because they have concerns about relying on China in terms of if there is a conflict or something, right? There's all these reasons. Or maybe it's all just bullshit and it's just xenophobic hysteria. I don't know, right? This is not my area of specialty. But it's a fact that right now, federal agencies are trying to get U.S.-made drone parts, right? We see Rotor Riot with their Brave flight controller, right, targeting that. And I'm sure they're not alone. Okay, so, well, that doesn't mean a damn thing to the hobbyist, right? So if someday the government says you can't import drone motors, can't import flight controllers, can't import ESCs from China, then maybe American manufacturing will have a chance. But if that means that drones cost another 2x multiplier or more over what they do today, I mean, would you pay $250 for a flight controller and ESC stack? Or would you just be like, screw it, this hobby's dead to me? So, I don't know. What's needed to compete? I do think that the potential DJI ban will continue to drive interest in U.S.-based manufacturing. I think that that's a trend that's going to continue. I don't know how that's going to play out for hobbyists, but for commercial and industrial users and government users, obviously, I think that is a trend that's going to definitely continue. How does adding tariff... Blunty, are you arguing with somebody about tariffs? Jesus Christ.
I'm trying to figure out what they actually mean.
Okay. What did he say?
He said the CHIPS Act will bring manufacturing back to the U.S. and lower pricing due to tariffs added to costs coming in from China. But I just don't understand why tariffs on things coming in from China would somehow lower prices in the U.S.
So the tariffs increase the price to the consumer for the foreign goods, which then raises the price ceiling the customer will accept, which then makes domestic manufacturing more viable, because the whole point of tariffs is that we're going to force the customer to pay more so that domestic manufacturing is now viable at the higher price point. The entire the premise of tariffs is that you can't bring the price point down, right?
Yeah, I mean, the only way you could make this conclusion is that you would have to say that you're guaranteeing that because these tariffs would keep increasing and then they can't get anything into the U.S., then companies would be able to be bigger because they could sell to more people and then they could lower prices. But that's some kind of like crazy, to me, roundabout thing, and you're trying to guess that that's going to be the case and there's going to be enough competition over time. And like, that's a lot of assumption, right?
That's a lot.
What I'll say is your statement is correct if you say, and U.S. will be lower prices than China after tariffs, because that's the point of them, right? That's the goal.
Yeah, if you've got a product that costs $50 from China and it costs U.S. manufacturers $100 to sell that product, and so no one's buying it from U.S. So then you add a tariff, and now the Chinese product costs $100, $150, $120. Now the U.S. product is $100 and it's cheaper than the Chinese one. Why would at that point, number one, at that point the U.S. manufacturer, like, they can't lower their price, or they would have been. Okay, well, maybe you make the argument, well, now the U.S. customers buying a shitload of these U.S. products, so their volume is up, so now they can lower their price. Why would they? The alternative is $120 because of the tariff, or $150. Why wouldn't they just keep charging $100 and be like, thank you, federal government, for removing our competition? And Blunty, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Let's just be 100% clear. He says manufacturing internal of the U.S. makes it cheaper by removing the tariffs, but it doesn't make it cheaper than now. It makes it cheaper than the new tariff price. That's what we're saying.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it makes it, what you're not doing, you're not making the U.S. manufacturing cheaper, you're making the foreign importing more expensive, so that the foreign importing costs more than the U.S. manufacturing. At no point does a tariff reduce the cost of U.S. manufacturing, unless theoretically you get more economies of scale because of increased volume, maybe. But again, I go back to, why wouldn't they just pocket that money, since they're protected by the tariff from competition from the external source?
Right. The only way that happens is you have internal competition across multiple companies that are trying to vie for this, right?
And by the way, what often really happens is that $50 Chinese part that costs Americans $100 to make costs the Chinese $3 to make. So you slap the tariff on, and now the Chinese part is $120 or whatever, except the Chinese just, I've gotten the numbers wrong. I've screwed up the numbers. But what you actually see happen is the tariff gets slapped on, and the Chinese price stays the same, and the Chinese company just accepts a lower profit margin, and they're still making plenty of money because the damn thing cost them peanuts to make in the first place. And so now the American company still isn't competitive. All you've done is squeeze the Chinese company slightly. So
I'll just say I have now completely lost the plot, because he says, don't forget you export back to China also. Nobody's exporting flight controllers to China. What are we talking about?
Even if you are, how does the tariff factor into that?
I don't understand.
It's an import tariff. Yeah. Okay, this conversation is over.